Have you ever had that situation where you spent years trying different shoes to finally find the perfect shoe, only to have the shoe company change it on you or discontinue it entirely? Well, I have more than once, and I'm once again in that position. Hi, my name is Scott Miller, and this is Trail Ambitions, where I talk about things that may be interesting to trail runners. In this video, I will be telling you a shoe tale of love found, love lost, maybe love found. It's about my quest to find the perfect trail running shoe. Now, technically, I already have this shoe. However, it is the last of its kind. It has been discontinued. Now, I've already scoured the internet, bought up every last pair in my size that I could find, and I'm now running in the last one. I am once again on a quest for the perfect shoe. I've selected a candidate, but as I speak to you right now, I am not sure if it's going to work for me. So this will be a two-part video, so both of us will have to wait till the end to see whether I've found love again. A key factor in this saga is I have become very particular in my trail running shoes. I have developed somewhat of a belief system. Being forced to change some of those beliefs is a bit of a challenge. I'm not saying that my beliefs are correct or even the way. There's simply my way. Perhaps some of you will relate. This is going to be a bit of a long story, because what I'd like to do first is take you through the process and how I got to this point and developed my belief system, and why I'm a bit anxious for the change. A long, long time ago, in a land far away, okay, I'm kidding. It was the 2000s, and it was right here. I think the shoe that I had when I started trail running was something from Brooks. I don't remember which model particularly. I don't think it was anything special, just what I was wearing at the time. Shortly after that, in 2005, the book Ultra Marathon Man by Dean Karnazes came out, which I read and found fascinating. I was immediately pulled into an ultra marathon obsession. Dean seemed cool. I soon found out that he was sponsored by the North Face, so I went out and I bought his signature shoe. I did one run in those shoes, and my feet hurt so bad, I couldn't wear them again. Now, no disrespect to Dean Karnazes, the North Face, or anybody who loved those shoes. They simply did not work for me. But it was my first aha moment where I realized that different shoes can be very different. That may sound naive, but up until that point, I didn't think much about shoes. My shoe buying process was, if it looked cool, I'll wear it. That experience set me on a path to figure out what works for me and why. Now, my approach was not scientific or academic. It was more pragmatic in nature. I determined the North Face shoe had two issues. First, it was dramatically overbuilt, so it was very stiff and inflexible. The second was the bend point. So if you look at where a shoe bends, that bend point was about a ½ inch behind where my Brooks were. So that bend point, plus how stiff the shoe was, it was forcing my foot to bend in an unnatural spot for me, which I believe is what ultimately caused all the foot pain. With that newfound knowledge, I headed back to the store and I found a brand called La Sportiva. These shoes did not appear to be overbuilt and were quite flexible. I started running in La Sportivas. I forgot the model that I started with. However, it was short-lived. Although I liked the shoe, I found myself spraining my ankles a lot. I have always sprained my ankles my entire life. I either have weak ankles or they would hit the ground poorly and then roll. However, as I tried to understand why these particular shoes caused me to sprain my ankle more often, I realized that the shoe last, or the curve, was more aggressive in that particular shoe than other shoes that I'd worn. Perhaps that came from La Sportiva's climbing shoe heritage. Regardless, I immediately started looking for another pair of shoes that had a straighter alignment or straighter last. As I did that, I did switch to another La Sportiva shoe. Since I have narrow feet, I came to appreciate the snug fit of the La Sportivas and gummy rubber lugs, which gave me more control when running downhill on technical rocky terrain. I then learned about a company called Inov-8. I picked up a pair of their X-Talon 212s. They were reminiscent of the La Sportivas in that they had a snug, tight fit with gummy rubber, but their lugs were much longer, which were even better on technical trails, especially wet rock surfaces. They were also lighter than the La Sportiva and even more flexible. And I was now rarely spraining my ankles, which was much appreciated. Additionally, the material in the X-Talons was very breathable and they drained water extremely well, which is very important in mountain running, especially in the springtime. I avoid waterproof shoes like those made with Gore-Tex. They tend to keep water in as well as they keep water out. And with a giant hole at the top where your foot goes into, I don't find a lot of value in just waterproofing the sides. At this point, I was starting to develop my shoe belief system. Narrow, tight fitting to have more control on technical trails. Large gummy rubber lugs to provide better grip on wet rocky surfaces. A light, flexible shoe that has a relatively straight last or shoe curve to enable my foot to conform to the trail and not restrict it to any particular bend point. And lastly, breathable and quick draining to prevent blisters from running with wet feet. In 2009, the book Born to Run by Christopher McDougall came out and attached a rocket to the minimalist shoe trend. With my shoe evolution, I was already headed in that minimalist shoe direction, so I jumped in with both feet. I immediately went out and bought some 5-finger Vibrams. I liked the idea of barefoot running, and I did try that a few times on grassy surfaces, but I could never bring myself to actually do it on sharp, technical, rocky trails, which is where the 5-finger Vibrams fit perfectly. With the Vibrams, I eased into them over time, building up my miles, which is why I believe I didn't have any issues or injuries with them, other than a few stub toes. And while running in those Vibrams, I had my biggest aha moment of my running career. Around this time, I'd been doing a lot of reading about proper running form. In particular, the book Chi Running by Danny and Catherine Dreyer. And I had determined that a midfoot strike was best for me as opposed to a heel strike with a roll. I'd been working on improving my technique. And despite me thinking that I was midfoot striking 100% of the time, every time I would see myself in a race picture, I'd have my legs straight out and I was about to heel strike every single time. So I was confused. Shortly after that, I happened to be running one of my longest runs at the time in my 5-finger Vibrams. And I started to feel my heel hitting the ground. And what I realized is that I start the run midfoot, but then as I got tired, at some point, I would start to stand up straighter rather than leaning from my ankles, and that would cause me to start putting my foot out and heel striking. It was only because I was wearing those thin Vibrams and I could feel the ground that I was able to notice at what point I would start switching from a midfoot to a heel strike. With this next phase of my shoe belief system development, I added the following: thin sole to maximize ground feel, and minimal shoe structure to allow my feet and leg muscles to do the work and take the impact off of my joints. The minimal flexible shoe structure also allows me to lace my shoes and tie them once when I buy them, and then slip them on and off like a slipper the entire time I wear them. That way, I always have the exact same tightness in my shoelaces every time I put them on. It is at this point that I started to develop the more controversial part of my shoe belief system. I say controversial because it goes against everything I've ever heard in a shoe store. I will also add a disclaimer here. Every body is different. What works best for me may not work best for you. You need to do your own research and create your own shoe belief system. If you agree with me, great. If you don't, great, as long as you find what works best for you. Okay, I don't believe in arch support. I don't believe that pronation or supination support is needed or good for you. And I do believe that a raised heel is the root cause of many running injuries. Let's dig into this a bit. Arch support. Many bridges are engineered with an arch structure. Why? Because that structure has proven to be incredibly strong. The weight of the structure gets distributed out to each endpoint, reducing the amount of load on any one point. What is the worst thing that you can do with this type of structure? Support it in the middle. Adding support in the middle now puts the full weight of the structure on that one point rather than distributing it across the 2 points. When I think about arch support in a shoe, I see it as adding support in a single spot, weakening the structure, or replacing the natural structure with an artificial one, which reduces the need for the foot to support itself, so it gets weaker. With that added support, when a situation occurs where the foot muscle needs to engage, an overuse injury can occur because the foot is not used to supporting itself. Pronation and supination. This is where the heel rolls in, pronation, or out, supination. I believe about 95% of people pronate. If you jump up and down, you are more than likely landing midfoot. I doubt you would feel comfortable landing on your heels or even flat foot. So if running is essentially multiple jumps back to back, why would heel striking make sense? To me, pronation and supination support are there to address problems that were created by the shoe in the first place. I see my legs as several levers. So the ankle, the calf, and the quad, and they act like shock absorbers. When you're using your feet as naturally intended and your muscles are developed appropriately, the flex in your ankle and your foot is how your body naturally absorbs the impact from running. Once you start to artificially support certain areas, you start to underuse those muscles in those areas, which then creates an opportunity for overuse injuries when those muscles are needed. I also feel this is why minimal shoes get a bad rap. People don't give themselves time to build up their muscles and they end up with overuse injuries. Raised heel. With a midfoot strike, you need to be able to land on the ball of your foot and then settle into your heel before pushing off and propelling yourself forward. I provide more detail on this in a video on running efficiency linked here. A raised heel will prevent you from settling in. To compensate, you may find yourself leaning further forward, almost toe striking, which could then cause injuries in your shins or your knees. Also, while trail running, you may have a lot of downhill, which will cause you to strike even further forward. Shoe companies refer to the difference between the height of the heel to the toe as the drop. So the back of the shoe to the front of the shoe. For example, a 0 drop shoe would be completely flat, whereas a 12 millimeter drop would have a heel that's raised up by 12 millimeters. It is important to note that measurement does not include the bed or the base at the bottom. It's simply the difference from the back to the front. A very thick shoe like the Ultra Olympus and a very minimal shoe like one from Viva Barefoot can both be 0 drop, even though one is raised off the ground quite a bit and the other one is very low to the ground. My preference is to stay at a 4 millimeter drop or less. Ideally, I prefer a 0 drop shoe. However, that reduces my options by quite a bit. So I've determined that I'll stick between a 0 and a 4 millimeter drop. And with my history of sprained ankles, I'm very tentative to raise the apex of my foot off the ground too far. Thick soles raises me off the ground more, which raises my apex. It makes it more prone to, tipping one side to the other, which could result in sprained ankles. For this reason, I want to stick to low profile shoes to keep that apex as close to the ground as possible. The lower apex and the increased ground feel has been a game changer for me in stability and preventing sprained ankles. I have even developed this sense that when I hit the ground, if my ankle is about to turn, I immediately collapse that side of my body. So a hip or knee, I kind of just go down. So it looks very dramatic, goofy even, but it has saved me so many times from actually spraining an ankle because I immediately just pull my leg up and collapse it. Your body will adapt to amazing things. Having that ground feel allows that sense to be hyper aware and catch myself before I sprain ankles, in most cases. So it's pretty obnoxious, but I am grateful for it. As a result of this, I have been against rock plates Now, rocks plates are typically a plate that they put in the bottom of the shoes to protect, make it more harder, protect from rocks from poking your feet. I have been against those because it reduces ground feel. Granted, a minimal shoe without a rock plate on very technical surfaces will beat your feet up a bit, but I've built my feet up over time to handle that impact. While running in the 5-finger Vibrams, I started to hit a limit with how many miles I could run in them, as well as the type of technical surfaces that I wanted to run in them. And in addition to that, the bottoms of those shoes were pretty flat and they did not do well on wet rock surfaces. And I started to look for something that was a cross between the X-Talon 212s and the 5-finger Vibrams. And I found the Inov-8 Bear Grips 200. These shoes had a zero drop, they had long gummy rubber lugs, and they were so flexible I could literally roll them up into a ball. I love these shoes. However, as mileage increased over the summer, I started to develop these bruises between the lugs. What was happening is that the finger or thumb-sized stones were being funneled into certain points between the lugs and impacting the bottom of my foot repeatedly. And so after several months of that repeated pounding in those specific areas, it would create these bruises, and they became so tender I had to stop wearing the shoe. So after those, I started looking for something that was very similar, but had a little more cushion under the foot. Still similar ground feel, but something that would protect me from those stones. It was at this point that I had my belief system pretty much set, with the addition of the following: a minimal drop range from 0 to 4 millimeters to enable good midfoot strike technique. Next, enough sole thickness to eliminate bruising. And lastly, no rock plate to maximize ground feel. So once again, I went back to Inov-8 and I found the X-Talon 190. The number on the Inov-8 shoe is the weight. So 190 is 190 grams. So an extremely lightweight shoe, and the drop was 3 millimeters, so within my 0 to 4 millimeter range. This shoe became my first love found. It was a perfect shoe for me. I wore this shoe for several years. Then Inov-8 decided to discontinue it. I switched to the X-Talon 200, which was 10 grams heavier, which wasn't really noticeable. However, it did not come in the precision fit, which is what Inov-8 refers to their narrow shoe as. It just had a wide fit, which was not ideal for me. I could definitely feel the play in the front of my foot, which caused less control on the downhills. So I had to get creative. So what I did is I decided to lace the shoe halfway up, tie it and cinch it down really tight in front, and then lace it the rest of the way and tie it again at the top. That way I could cinch down close to the front, getting as tight a fit in the front as I could, and leave the upper somewhat loose. If I clamped it down too hard at the top, it would cut off circulation. That's how I accommodated the wider fit shoe. After this, then, I noticed that Inov-8 came out with an X-Talon 210 that also had a 3 millimeter drop, but offered a precision fit. I immediately switched to the shoe, and although it was 10 grams heavier, I didn't notice. I was in love again. The X-Talon 210 has been my go-to shoe for many years, and a few years later, they made it even better by offering a graphene version, which made the lugs a little stronger, still flexible, but they didn't wear as quickly. It made the shoe even more durable, so it was the perfect shoe for me, but then Inov-8 discontinued it. And it appears that Inov-8 has changed their entire strategy and are no longer offering any of the ultra minimalist trail running shoes. They still offer the X-Talon 212s. However, the 212s have an even more aggressive precision fit. I wore these on a large descent, and I noticed that it was squeezing my foot, and actually I felt like it was elongating my toe because it started tapping on the front even though I was wearing the exact same size. I'm already sized a half size up, so to stay in these shoes I'd have to increase another half size, which I really didn't want to do. Plus, these have a 6 millimeter drop, which exceeds the limit that I had set for myself. So not really the ideal shoe for me anymore. And that brings me to today. I have exhausted eBay, I've exhausted Craigslist, I've exhausted internet searches, and I can no longer find my favorite shoe in my size. So this truly is the last one in the world that I could find. I need to find something new. So let's recap. I have this belief system. These beliefs are narrow, tight fitting to have more control over technical trails. Large, gummy rubber lugs to provide better grip on wet, rocky surfaces. Light, flexible shoe with a relatively straight last to enable my feet to conform to the trail and not force it to bend in any particular spot. Breathable and quick draining to prevent blisters from running in wet feet. Thin sole and no rock plate to maximize ground feel. Minimal shoe structure to allow my feet and my legs to do the work, taking stress off of my joints. Minimal drop, 0 to 4 millimeters max, to enable a good midfoot strike technique. Enough sole thickness to prevent bruising. Inov-8 has introduced a new shoe this year called the Inov-8 MudTalon Speed. I am very excited and optimistic that this will be my new favorite shoe. However, it's going to force me to rethink some of my shoe beliefs. So let's compare its specs against my criteria. 4 millimeter drop. Okay, so that checks, that's good. 260 grams, a little heavier than I'm used to, but still considered a light shoe, so that'll be okay. Precision fit, okay, that checks the box, great. Extremely breathable and drains water quickly. Okay, great, perfect. Large gummy rubber lugs, 8 millimeter lugs, great, checks the box. Sole thickness, 11 millimeter heel to 7 millimeter forefoot. So that's where the 11 minus 7 is your 4 millimeter drop. But having that extra, I don't know if that thickness is too much or not. I haven't checked what my previous shoe was, but that plus the rock plate is going to be somewhat less ground feel. I'm hopeful that it will be enough so that I don't sprain my ankle. Everything checks quite well. The shoe looks great. It's got almost like a see-through thing here, so I'm sure it will drain extremely well. It's still quite flexible. I can tell it's stiffer than my previous shoe, but still can be quite flexible. It's the amount of material here and that rock plate is what I need to test out. Am I going to sprain my ankle from it, or am I going to be able to feel the ground, or is it, just the way it's laid out, it will give me the foundation that will make it feel solid for me. I've watched some videos on the web, and they've said the ground feel is pretty good. So again, I'm optimistic that I will also feel the same way. Now, the added weight and the toe guard and the rock plate, as I've gotten older, I'm definitely, especially this summer, feeling more of the impact to my body. So perhaps it's time for me to step it up a little bit, get a little bit thicker, shoe, a little bit more padding, some toe guard. So I'm not opposed to deviating from my belief system. I just want to make sure I don't sprain my ankle. That's what it comes down to. The 1 millimeter increase in drop is still within my 4 millimeter limit, so no concerns there. The only other thing that's missing is the graphene bottom. So there's no graphene built into this, so I'm expecting that the wear will be a little more aggressive, but that's more of a nice to have. It's not going to change how the shoe feels. I will also mention that when watching some of the videos that were reviewing this shoe, they did complain about the back here being very stiff and actually causing some blistering. We'll have to see. I'm used to my shoes being so flexible that you put them on and they're already feeling like socks and they're good to go. Perhaps this one I may have to have more of a break-in period. So we'll see. I'm excited to try out these shoes. I'm gonna take them out for a few runs and then I will be reporting back to you. Wish me luck. Okay, I'm back from my run. I took the shoes out on a trail that's about 3.3 miles. It's one of my favorite short morning runs because it has a little bit of everything. It's called Hogback Ridge in North Boulder. My immediate thought are that the shoes are awesome. However, are they awesome for me? I wish it was an easy decision. Let's start with the positives. The shoe looks great. I like the black and yellow colors, somewhat muted compared to my last shoes, but still very similar in color, which means I don't need to go out and buy new clothing. Come on now, we all think about it. They feel good on my feet, no pressure points. As I mentioned earlier in the video, the shoes are heavier than what I'm used to, and I'm assuming that's from the additional toe protection and then the rock plate. For those of you that are already used to wearing shoes in this weight category, you are gonna love these. My feet felt well protected, and I did like the feeling of the added protection. I still had some ground feel, but is it enough? I'm not sure. I'm gonna pause here for a moment and share with you one last piece of my shoe belief system. This one has to do with minimum and maximum shoes. You know, the minimalist versus the very puffy, overprotective shoes. The analogy I like to think about when I'm on this topic is related to US football. There have always been injuries in football, obviously because it's a high impact sport, but the injuries have changed over time. What we see nowadays is many more internal injuries, like concussions and brain damage. As our padding technology has improved, the players started hitting harder, which has resulted in more internal injuries. And I'm using similar logic in my body inside of my shoes. When I wear minimal shoes, I don't need to impact the ground as hard to feel it. In fact, there are as many nerve endings in your feet as there are in your hands. After going barefoot or wearing minimal shoes, you allow those nerves to feel more. However, if your shoes have a lot of extra padding in them, you won't feel as much, and therefore you'll have a tendency to impact or hit the ground harder to get that same level of nerve response or that feedback that tells you, is this a stable place to place my foot? At least this is how I think about it and what I end up doing. My running goal is longevity, so I want as little impact to my body as possible. This is why I'm a fan of minimal shoes and why I feel so strongly about them. Okay, back to the positives of the shoe. I did not sprain my ankle. There was one case where I was descending some trail steps and I did land on a weird angle. I was able to feel it and correct for it, so it was all good. The platform is wide and stable, which I like. I did not feel any rubbing or hot spots in the upper part of the heel, which was reported by other reviewers in their videos. So that was a good thing. The traction and the grip felt perfect, as I'd expect from these type of lugs on these shoes. I did not feel the tips of my toes hitting the front, and the precision fit felt snug, but not overly snug. So just right. So were there any negatives? Unfortunately, yes, one major one. After the run, I felt a pain in my left foot across the top of my foot, an area that they call the dorsal area of the foot. It was a subtle pain, but noticeable. It was one of those pains that was coming on slowly, and you could just tell that it was going to get worse the longer I ran. This scares me a bit. It is essentially the same pain I felt years ago with the North Face shoe, although with these to a lesser extent. I have a few big runs coming up in the next couple weeks, so I don't want to push it too far until after those runs are finished. However, after that, I will be giving these shoes another try to see if the pain continues. One thought is that the shoe simply needs to be broken in. I'm used to very flexible shoes, so perhaps I just need to give it some time and start with some shorter runs so I can loosen up or get the rock plate to flex a little bit more, which will adjust that bend point to what works best for me. These shorter runs will also give me time to make sure that I don't have an issue with the reduction in ground feel. If that holds true and I can get the pain to stop, these shoes will be a winner. There you have it. This was a long one, and I thank you for hanging in there with me. Since you've made it this far, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and help me build this community. In summary, I can't say that I've found love yet, but I can say we're dating. We've gone on one date that overall was pretty good, and I'm looking forward to how this relationship will evolve. What about you? Do you have a shoe belief system that you'd care to share? Or maybe a love lost, love found shoe tale? I'd love to hear about them. Please add a comment below. Okay, that's it for now. May your quest for the perfect trail shoe be a short and pleasant one.